I had a really interesting childhood in that we had an arcade in our attic, and I had an actual real Donkey Kong arcade cabinet in that collection. And so my first time playing Donkey Kong, was probably, God, I don't know how old I was, but we literally got to play that all the time. And we had, and my favorites were Donkey Kong Jr. and Pango. And Pango is this sort of little known game that's a little bit like Pac-Man meets, Dig Dug or something. And, Donkey Kong was magical. The idea that the map changed when you beat that first level, and then when you beat that next level, was so freaking incredible to me, because it was magical. All I wanted to do was get to the end so that I could see what that next change was gonna be. And, funny enough, Pango, every other level, you would get this silly little dance the penguins would do. And all I wanted to see was what that next dance would be, and it was like score, everything else didn't matter. It was like just the sort of reveal that was coming at the ends of each one of these was something that I just was wound around the axle on. My dad used to always talk about games that are easy to learn and impossible to master. And I love this concept, right? Because it applies to all games, whether you're talking about video games or even something like chess, right? Chess, the rules are really simple, right? What governs each of the characters, but the complexity goes super deep, and you sort of never win forever, right? You might win today, but you're not going to win, it doesn't mean you're not going to win tomorrow. That easy to learn, impossible to master is such a balance. And, I think of like what that author, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, talks about flow, where it's not too easy that you get bored, and it's not too hard that you get frustrated. You're sort of right in that sweet spot. And games are so powerful at, good games are so great at being able to sort of slowly ramp you into the complexity. You think about Super Mario Brothers level 1. Until you figure out to like jump on Koopas and jump over pits, like you're not going anywhere, right? You're gonna fall into pits and die running into Koopas until you finally figure that out. And then you go to level 2 and you learn how to swim, and it's like the swimming didn't show up at all until you sort of had those first things dialed. And so that stuff is as true now as it's ever been, where a good game captures you in the first 5 seconds, and then in the first 10 seconds, and only if you have done that well, do you get the right to engage people for minutes and hours. We're here at our micro amusement park in downtown LA, a place called 2-Bit Circus, and we think about this constantly. Our company is actually based in the front of the park, very much by design, because we will have a hypothesis about what might be a fun game. We build it, we put it in front of people, and we see real time, wow, that's too hard, or that's too easy, or like you got to sort of iterate and test. The game maker is a researcher and an experimenter. You start with a premise, and then you keep iterating and testing until you get that balance just right. But it's really hard to know in advance where that line is. Nintendo's entrance into the US was, so exciting for me. We'd actually grown up with Atari, but frankly didn't play a lot of it because Dad was always bringing home the new stuff. And so we had the early Sega, and then the Famicom. We were always getting to try this new stuff. He was obsessed with bringing home the new things. And the NES was so magical, right? Having all of those different colors, all the sort of depth of game library and capacity, and even just the weird of the robot and the power pad. There was such clear exploration in Nintendo's approach to interfaces and ways to play. At the time, and Atari had been that, incredible innovator in the 70s, and had really pushed the boundary of multiplayer gaming, particularly in public, in arcades, and had all sorts of different explorations in that. But, as my dad sold, Atari to Warner, and Warner was very focused, at the time they were selling records, and they knew how to sell records, and they, the idea of plastic cartridges looked a lot like plastic records, and so that was sort of a nice port for them. But I think that the passion for game experimentation and interface experimentation and sort of what it meant to create, an incredible game started to wander a little bit at Atari. And so I think that, Nintendo their timing was awesome, and they got into the market and sort of got the baton and ran with it, and have continued, to innovate in such incredible ways. And so many times people think, oh, Nintendo's on the ropes and this is the time, and then bam, they come out swinging with the Wii, and then they're on the ropes again, and bam, they come out swinging with the Switch. And it's just like, it's so incredible because they really, time and again, have kind of reimagined what video gaming looks like, in their exploration. And they did VR in the 90s, I mean, that was freaking awesome. And, whether maybe it didn't stick, but they were thinking about it and they were trying it. I have infinite respect for Nintendo. The Game Boy holds such a place in my heart. I saved up for this thing for months. It was an empty your bank account moment.
Nintendo's latest machine, but their handheld console, the Game Boy, is still the world's most popular games platform.
And I left with my Game Boy and Super Mario World, and I obsessed over that thing. The idea that you could hook a cable up and play Tetris against each other, and while not the best of that, of the technology at the time, the gameplay was so compelling and so fun. I'm still the best at that version of Tetris over any other Tetris that there is, But that gameplay was so compelling and so awesome. You didn't care almost that it was black and white. You didn't care about any of its shortcomings. Even the form factor was awesome. It fit in your pocket. That was super powerful. And I think this is something Nintendo has done such a great job of over the years is, when the Wii came out, it was not the best console by a landslide, in terms of performance. But utilizing accelerometers in that way and really embracing multiplayer and really some simple game mechanics so that it could kind of be for all ages made it a breakout hit. And so I think their willingness to, take a piece of tech that they can that has sort of hit a size that is inexpensive, has hit a scale that's inexpensive, a reliability, and then being able to take, that really hard and thing that they're really so good at of just great game mechanics, great social play, and apply it to their consoles is something that is very singular for Nintendo, and something I think they do just brilliantly. Sega, the arrival of Genesis was really exciting, These were, there were some great titles on it. Sonic the Hedgehog was something that was everywhere, and the idea of it moving that fast, it was like hard to even keep track of him, the side scrolling was amazing. And so I think that they really came out swinging and in general, right? People buy consoles for the games, right? The console is the tax. Nobody wants to go out and shell out $200 for hardware, right? They care about the game. And so something like Sonic really was compelling enough to get it into people's homes. I think interestingly, you look at Sega today, and Sonic's their one major IP, and it's sort of wild that in the fullness of time, you look back at all of the characters in the Nintendo landscape that are, so iconic and powerful, that Sega sort of out of that whole time period didn't end up with more characters that were sort of theirs, is shocking to me, because it really, I think back and I still have such wonderful nostalgia for that time with Sega. But Nintendo, with each of those new consoles, continued to sort of double down on their universes, and in a way that I think has continued to serve them well to this day. I would love to know Miyamoto better, because I can't help but imagine this sort of back and forth between the game designers and the hardware engineers, at Nintendo, as they sort of go back and forth, imagining, what new ways we can play now that we've got accelerometer wands, or now that we have 6 controllers on a Switch. I am absolutely obsessed with my Switch now, and the idea that shooting arrows in Zelda, feels as good as it does, had to sort of be this concert between, the game designer and the hardware engineer. One of the things that I sort of so love about the worlds that Miyamoto has created they really are worlds. I mean, world building on the order of Harry Potter and Marvel, where there's this depth of characters, that you fall in love with over and over again and learn more about, with each new title release. And they become whole families, right? You've got Toad and the princess, and then you've got Yoshi, and then all of a sudden Bowser has a whole team of miscreants, and it's like that is, it just continues to get deeper and deeper to the point where you kind of get the right to, apply them in all sorts of new domains and make a racing game, and bam, Super Mario Kart is just an instant love fest because of all the, different ways that you could play and the fact that you can take on your favorite characters. And, I'm such a huge fan that, those worlds, and I'm gonna just keep playing them. There was a lot of celebration around Neo Geo, and this was like, oh my gosh, there's this huge capacity, now with this new console, and it didn't work really, and I think back to that time, and despite being as beautiful as it was, there wasn't that many titles, and it was really expensive, like way more expensive than my savings would be able to sort of pull off, but something about N64 was right at that level of like accessibility and and magical display, and still had a lot of those great characters that you knew, and then to have it be 3D, so that now all of a sudden your Mario Kart is just absolutely gorgeous, and those crazy spaceship controllers, and the fact that there were lots of them, and the N64 was a special threshold, and we played the hell out of that. So N64 was a special time. The Wii was so special because of how cross-demographic it was. For the hardcore, it had great stuff. I mean, Mario Kart was amazing. A lot of the sports games were amazing. There was a lot of fun there. But it was also so easy. They put it in old folks' homes, right? Like, it was the first time my mom was like, oh, this is video games? Like, video games had such a bad rap up until then. But then when all of a sudden people like, oh, well, I'm moving and it's a natural motion, all of a sudden that sort of blew open the doors for so many more people to not just sit down and play a game, but stand up and play a game. And that was, for me, a really powerful moment, because I really believe everybody's a gamer, right? It just depends on what kind of game. Do you like football or do you like Pokemon? And the Wii was sort of an early time where video games kind of could break out of the shackles of sort of how parents had thought of them, and be something that everybody wanted to do. Nintendo is an innovator. They have, for literally decades, pushed the boundaries of the way we play. And they have innovated in interfaces, they've innovated in game mechanics, they've built their own worlds and pushed the boundary of character building and what what a universe can look like. I mean, the Nintendo story is amazing. And if you zoom out from just any one console or any one game, from a business, the fact that they continued to innovate and would run up against walls, and the markets would be saying, oh, finally they're finished, it's not gonna happen. And then bam, they come out with something awesome. And then, they ride that wave and push the boundaries of the industry, and then, run up against the wall again and come out with something, and it's an okay hit, it's a base hit, but they keep trudging, and then bam, they hit a home run. I mean, their story is, it's a story that gives me goosebumps, because it's, dedication and innovation and, trying and failing and trying and winning. It's, it's what, frankly, we could all hope for in our own lives.